A circle is defined to be the set of all points equidistant from a given point. So this is a definition that you probably learned in geometry, but a circle is the set of all points equidistant from a given point. We call the given point the center. So we call that the center of the circle. And then all of these points that are on the outside, this is actually the circle. So the circle is these points. The center is not actually a part of the circle. All of the points that are the exact same distance from a given point are what characterize a circle. Now, the standard form of an equation of a circle is x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. So this is how we tend to write the equation of a circle with center at h comma k. So given the center of the circle, which we will call h comma k, if we want to find where some point on the circle is, what we would do is we would realize that this is r. If we want to find a point x comma y on the circle, this distance would be x minus h, and this distance would be y minus k. And so notice if we just did the Pythagorean theorem, we would have x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. And that would be how we end up with the equation of a circle. It's important to note that these don't have to be the same length. It just so happened that I drew something where it looked like they were the same length, but I could have drawn my radius to be like this, and the right triangle that I drew could have a much further distance in the y direction than in the x direction, or vice versa. It doesn't really matter, because any point on the circle, if I picked any point, the x, y values of that point on the circle should be able to substitute into the equation and end up working out. Okay, so let's graph a couple circles. First, x squared plus y squared minus 8x plus 6y equals 0. Notice that this does not look like x minus h squared plus y minus k squared equals r squared. That's highly disappointing, because we know that the radius r and center hk would be very easy to graph this circle. The good news is we have learned how to complete the square in the past, so that will be something that we're going to do right now. So x squared minus 8x plus some number plus y squared plus 6y plus some number equals 0 plus the same two numbers. So let's recall, if we are completing the square, we take this number, as long as there's no a value, which in this case a is 1, so it ends up working out pretty well. We'll take this number and divide it by 2. So we have x minus 4, the quantity squared. And then we take that negative 4 and square it, and we put 16 here. So we'll add 16 to both sides of the equation. Likewise, for the y's, we have this plus 6y. So I'm going to take that 6, divide it by 2, I get 3. Then I'm going to square that and get 9. So I end up with x minus 4 squared plus y plus 3 squared equals 25. So my center is at 4, negative 3, because HK is the center of the circle. And notice the equation has minuses in it. That should make sense, because if I substitute 4, 3 in for x and y, so if I subbed 4 in here I'm sorry, 4, -3. So if I subbed 4 in for x and -3 in for y, I would get 0 plus 0, which would mean I am 0 units away from the center of the circle. So that should make some sense that 4, -3 is the center of the circle. And then my radius is 5 because the square root of 25 is 5. So I'm going to put 4, 3 as the center of my circle. And then since my radius is 5, I'm going to go 5 in all directions. That'll make it relatively easy to graph my circle. And then I'll graph my circle. And I didn't graph it perfectly, but it's pretty close. Second problem. We're going to have to complete the square again. I'll get everything on one side of the inequality. So notice this is an inequality, which means we're going to be shading in this problem. So I will have x squared minus 4x plus blank plus y squared plus 3y. I'm going to subtract the 5y from both sides. So I'll get y squared minus 2y plus blank. And then we'll have greater than or equal to. Notice that I had a 9 on this side. I will subtract 9 from both sides. So 8 minus 9 is -1. So now let's complete the square. I get x minus 2 squared because -4 divided by 2 is -2. Square that, I get 4. I'm going to add that to the right as well. And then y squared minus 2y, I'm going to take the -2 and divide that by 2. So I get y minus 1 squared. -1 squared is 1. So -1 plus 4 plus 1 gives me 4. So my center of the circle is at 2, 1. My radius is 2 because the square root of 4 is 2. And so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to graph the circle with center 2, 1, radius 2. I'll graph the circle. One thing I want to note is if the problem was a greater than sign instead of a greater than or equal to sign, I would not be able to graph a circle like this. I would have had to make it a dotted circle, but that's not the case in this problem because it was a greater than or equal to sign. So I'm going to graph the circle where all the values are filled in on the circle. And then since it is greater than or equal to, I need all of the values that are further than r squared away from the circle. So further than 2 as my distance. So my distance needs to be further than 2 away. So that means that I'm going to shade all of the values outside of the circle. And obviously it would go on forever, not just on the part of the graph that we can see, but that is how you do that problem. Thirdly, and finally, write the equation of the circle with center -3, 2 that goes through the point 1, 7. So that makes the left side of our equation x plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared. And the thing that we don't know is what r squared is. So I'm going to have to find that. I can make it r squared, or I can just kind of figure out what it is because I don't really need to know r. It doesn't specifically tell me that I need the radius. So I can just call this some value. Let's say it's w. I don't know, whatever we want to call it. Now I'll take the 0.17 and I'll substitute it in for x and y. So I have 1 plus 3 squared plus 7 minus 2 squared equals whatever r squared is going to be. So remember that I made r squared equal to w for, I don't know, it was the first letter that came to mind. So 4 squared plus 5 squared equals whatever my equation is going to end up equaling. So 16 plus 25 is 41. So my final answer is x plus 3 squared plus y minus 2 squared equals 41. If it asked me for the radius, I would say it is the square root of 41, but they didn't ask me. And that is a quick note on circles.